If you're into true crime shows or channels, you may have heard this story before, or at least the main details. I've seen it covered in several myself, but here's some context. This event happened 11 years ago. I just turned 18 and moved to Orange County, California. I moved into an apartment complex near the community college I was attending, so a bunch of younger people around my age lived there. I didn't know a single person in California, so I would take any opportunity to socialize and meet new people. A big gathering place at the complex was at the main pool, where people would drink and relax in the sun. Over the first few months, I would meet a bunch of people while hanging out at the pool. I never got super close to any of them, but I would see these same people several days a week. We would often go back to each other's apartments after the pool to drink or smoke some more. It was a really mellow and fun environment. 3 people I would see all the time were Sarah, Mike, and John. One day after hanging out at the pool, Sarah, my girlfriend, and I went back to my apartment. The 3 of us smoked and Sarah went back home. Regular day. The next day, we were at the pool and there were a few of the usual people missing, but still a solid 10 people, so we didn't really notice. We go home later that night and my girlfriend gets a call from one of our friends. My girlfriend playfully answers her phone and the expression on her face starts to change. She's just listening and her eyes got super wide. She says, "What the heck? Are you serious?" and hangs up the phone. I'm super confused, so I ask her, What? What happened?" She says, "Dude, the police just found Sarah dead in Mike's apartment and Mike is nowhere to be found." What the heck? It was insane. I asked her if he said anything else, but she told me he was really hard to understand. We went to bed and met up with the usual crowd at the pool the next day, which included John and his fiancée. We were all talking about how unbelievable this is. Sarah was the epitome of sweet, and Mike was easily one of the kindest people I'd ever met. He was one of the first people I met when I moved, and he gave my underage ass some beer and told me stories. These were both good people. It didn't make any sense. We all kind of started speculating and just tried to make sense of it. Nobody can get a hold of Mike. We all start to worry if he's safe. Somebody suggests that Mike probably killed Sarah, panicked and ran. That was a hard pill to swallow for most of us, but it was the only thing that kind of made sense. John shook his head and said, "Man, just awful." We all dispersed and went home. It would be the last time that I would see most of these people. Fast forward a month or two, I was hanging out in my apartment one evening when my girlfriend called me frantically. "Please come to my friend's apartment. You're not going to believe this crap. This is the most messed up shit I've ever experienced," she said. I rushed over to the apartment where my girlfriend was. She was with 2 friends we knew from the pool. One of them was crying hysterically while the other sat with him. My girlfriend motioned for me to go outside and the other friend stayed back to keep consoling the other. Once we were out of earshot, she told me why her friend was crying so intensely. Her friend had just got back from being with the police. He was asked to identify pieces of a dismembered body that were found in the sewer. He was crying because he positively identified the body parts as Mike's. How did the police know they were there? They knew because John told them he did it. Turns out John was and still is a broke piece of crap. The bastard was engaged and didn't have enough money for his wedding. Being a smart person, Mike had a bunch of money saved up. John found out about it and decided to kill Mike and steal his money. John was an acting student and asked Mike to help him move some heavy things to the theater. When Mike's back was turned, John shot him. He then took Mike to another location where he dismembered his body and dumped the remains in the sewer. John took Mike's keys and phone and then also went back to Mike's apartment. From there, he texted Sarah on Mike's phone asking for her to come over because he wanted to talk. Being the sweet and caring person she is, Sarah went over to Mike's apartment to help him feel better. When she got there, John snuck up behind her and shot her. He left the apartment and framed Mike for Sarah's murder. John was caught because he's a stupid idiot. He paid some kid to withdraw money from Mike's ATM account. Cops found the kid and he told them about John. They quietly tracked John down at his freaking bachelor party and he was taken in for questioning, where he would admit that he murdered Sarah and Mike. He would later be sentenced to death. After sentencing, Mike's dad spoke to John across the courtroom and said, "My only regret is that the state of California doesn't allow me to kill you myself." It turns out his fiancée tried to help him hide evidence and she was sentenced to time as well. All in all, a pretty dark story. Aside from the violence, what messes me up is that this guy had literally just murdered 2 of our friends and he was at the pool commiserating with us, like genuinely acting upset, sad, and confused. He's a horrible human and I hope he suffers for the rest of his life. My deepest and continued condolences go out to the families of the 2 innocent people that were killed. I stopped quickly at a Safeway on the way home from work. As I was walking back to my car, I saw a couple walking a fluffy white husky dog. A big dog, and in my head, I marveled at how fluffy it was. I love dogs. I mean, who doesn't? I got to my car, and as I was climbing in, I heard a female voice say something unintelligible. I glanced around and saw the guy who had his dog standing behind the car next to me, which struck me as odd and a little bit disconcerting. I hit the door lock button immediately. I started my car, and as I did, I noticed a girl standing on my passenger side peering in my window. Her mouth moving, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. She clearly wanted me to roll down the window though. Oh no. Heck no. Not a chance. I've watched way too many true crime shows to even consider doing this. Do you know how many women go missing from grocery store parking lots? It's actually insane. Neither do I don't know the number, but based on what I've watched, it's a whole lot. I've made eye contact for half a second now, shook my head sternly and put my car into gear. I reversed out of the spot, careful not to hit her but also completely ignoring her as she got more and more distraught, waving her arms and flailing at my car. She was wearing pajamas from what I could see, and getting more and more upset at me ignoring her. Her partner remained in the shadows with the dog, seemingly unaware that I'd already clocked him and was watching him too. There was a tiny part of my brain asking, what if she needs help? But a much bigger part of my brain went, nope. If they need help, they can go into the store and ask them to call 911. Also, there were two of them and only one of me. I'm outnumbered, plus they have a huge dog. Why the heck would they ask a small, young, lone woman in a parking lot for help, unless they had nefarious intentions? My mind went to drugs, maybe. Or trafficking. I'm almost certain they would be asking for money, or a ride somewhere, even sketchier, or some form of assistance, and, no. I am under no obligation to help anyone, especially a stranger. Also, you know what? I've helped plenty of people today. I've helped people under careful, cautious observation. I work as a caregiver in a nursing home. If you are approaching a single young woman in a dark parking lot at 10:30 at night, I owe you absolutely nothing. Screw off. My mom didn't raise a fool. Anyways, a reminder to always trust your gut. You should read The Gift of Fear by Gavin D. Becker. Set up boundaries with people and hold strong to those boundaries. Be rude if it means keeping yourself safe. Hello everybody, I recently found this subreddit and reading through the stories brought back two memories from my childhood that I mostly stuffed into a box in the back of my brain. I figured I'd share with y'all. This is the first and scarier of the two. I'll post the other in a few days. I grew up in a major but relatively small US city. We lived in a neighborhood that bordered one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in town. It was an extremely safe neighborhood, but it was still a city and crime existed, of course. I was taught young about street smarts and stranger danger, and thankfully I was, because on that day it saved me and some of my best friends. The day of the encounter was a surprisingly warm, sunny day. My best friend lived a few houses down from me and essentially lived at my house most of our childhood. He was over from sunup to sundown. We had another good friend with us that day and we were trying to decide what kind of trouble the three of us were going to get into. My family had the largest backyard in the neighborhood, so that was often ground zero for our shenanigans, but on this particular day we decided to play in the front. If my memory serves correctly, we had intended to do something involving our skateboards and water balloons. There we are, filling up our water balloons at the spigot next to the garage. Visible from the street when a white van with no windows pulls up. I know, it doesn't get more stereotypical than that. There was a very large man with a scraggly beard in the front, with trash piled up on the dash and a passenger seat. Instantly, all three of us froze, and I distinctly remember a chill running up my spine. Something felt wrong instantly. This man yells out to us, "Hey, you kids know what time it is?" We all kind of looked at each other for a few seconds before my best friend was able to stammer out the time in a very soft, intimidated kind of way. The man's response was, "What? I can't hear you. Come over here so I can hear you." With that comment, my friend instantly tensed up. He looked over at me and I could see the fear in his face. Thankfully, we all had better sense than that, and my body repeated the time at a volume everybody on the block would be able to hear. In retrospect, I think he may have been trying to yell out enough that my mom, who was in the backyard, might hear us. After this, the man seemed slightly disappointed, probably because we didn't approach and there was no denying that he heard that time. So he proceeds to offer us a laptop with absolutely no prompt or context. "You kids want a laptop?" We all seem to respond in unison. "No." The man in the van continues, "You sure? I got a brand new Dell laptop for you." At this point, we all knew something was very off and decided to go play inside. As we headed towards the door, he called out from behind us, "Where are you guys going? I thought we were talking, don't leave." I went up to my room to play, which had a window looking out into the street, and for the next 30 minutes, the man just circled the block. Man in the creepy pedo van with all the free laptops. May we never meet. At the time, we all shrugged the event off pretty quickly and didn't talk about it for a few years. We all still remember it like yesterday and affects us so much more these days than it did back then. Thankfully, we had the stranger dangerous sense and we're all safe. The worst part is I grew up right across the street from an elementary school, and I sometimes wonder if that's the reason he was on the block in the first place. I woke up around 3 in the morning. Yeah, I know, witching hour, to my dog furiously barking. It startled me awake because he only barks like that when someone he doesn't know is in his house. After a short while he stops barking and we are both intently listening for any noises. My heart is beating as I hear clicking sounds coming from the living room and I am undecided if somebody is in the house or not. Thinking maybe it's the fridge, but it's this distinct noise. It was a super windy night, so I was also thinking that perhaps the wind blew something loose, but this was coming from inside the house and no windows were open. I lie in my bed frigid with eyes wide open and ears listening hard. My dog eventually jumps back onto my bed and falls asleep. Keep the bedroom door locked so I feel a bit safer, especially with my dog. I figured if he says it's fine, then it's probably fine. I don't hear any more noises and eventually I fall back asleep. The next morning, I examine the living room for any possible culprits of the noise. As I'm looking around, it suddenly dawns on me. The door. I remember the door handle makes a clicking sound when it's pushed down. To be sure, I go to my front door and push down on the handle. What I hear is what I heard the previous night. That light clicking sound. Discreet, yet distinct. Somebody was trying to get in my house. Edit. Living right next to a prison didn't make me feel any better about this occurrence, by the way. This is a long story, so bear with me. And it's all true. I'm just happy I'm still alive. It was the summer of 1997 and I was a grad student in Northern California, from overseas. Not an immigrant then, just a foreigner getting a degree and planning to go back to the old country afterwards. At the time, my girlfriend was still back home abroad, since we both expected me to return to Europe after graduation and maybe, though unspoken at the time, possibly get married after. So she came over for a summer vacation. Let's do a car trip down to Southern California, or let's take the coastal highway down to South Cali, see Santa Barbara, LA, Venice Beach, and San Diego. Even drive down into Baja. Sound like a lot of fun for two 20-somethings visiting California. My then girlfriend, down this description of her physical features, is entirely serving as a preparation for what was to come that day. So, please screw off perverts. Had perfectly shaped thin legs and curved body, long hair, and was generally speaking quite attractive. She was also borderline paranoid, which I knew then already, and she had given me plenty of headaches when she had dragged me into conflict situations where she demanded I defend her like a man, when the situation had actually been completely provoked by her and deteriorated due to her unstable, let's say, mental tendencies. Hence my tendency to not immediately jump on the thought of getting married. Frankly, I wasn't sure about the marriage part, but I knew that then, and I went along with the demands and plans as usual that day. We were nonetheless in love and all of that, I perhaps a little bit less than her. So we did drive down to South California from the Bay Area, and eventually my old rusty but beloved clunky 80s convertible I had cheaply acquired as an almost wreck in the Bay Area took us along a beach road to a motel in San Diego. Let's pick a motel near the beach, she said, so we can step out and see the swim in the morning. Let's check in, get dinner somewhere, and drive around town to get the feel. Okay, what she wants goes, I guess. She pointed at a motel along the coastal road. There was one after another, but she knew what she wanted, so she chose. This is the one, she said. Let's park and see. The vacancy sign was lit. The parking spots in the motel courtyard were all but empty. I drove in and parked. I had driven the whole day, and she could see I was tired. I'll drive later, she said sweetly. I was grateful. She goes to the motel counter while I unload our suitcases. Coming with the suitcases to the reception, she is talking to a youngish, tall, dark blonde guy behind the counter. Not bad looking. He is looking her up and down with small eyes, clearly checking her out. Looks at me, then turns around and grabs a key from the board and says, I got the perfect room for you. And he leads us up outside the stairs. The motel is built just like a chain of rooms lined up. The front all looking out towards the ocean and the doors toward the motel parking lot courtyard. He takes us to a room right smack in the middle of the long building. Second floor. The entire motel seems empty. I'm tired, but why this room? I wonder. Sleeping in the luggage. Why not downstairs or at least one of the ends? The view is the same everywhere. As we enter, I notice one smaller door next to our motel room door, which says, Service Personnel Only. Our room is right next to it. It was built narrowly, but it had a big bed and bathroom, and on the left wall just across from the big bed, a giant mirror. On the wall of that service room. The guy nods and leaves us to it. As soon as we are alone in the room and he has left, I turn to my girlfriend and say, Don't you think this is weird? She says, What? I point at the mirror and take a closer look. Yup, it's built fixedly on the wall, not hanging on the wall. I find this extra creepy. She says, Don't be paranoid. Okay, maybe. I have to get something out of the car anyway, so I step outside, only to see Mr. Motel Man just stepping out of the service room, locking it behind himself and heading downstairs. Once I was back up, I took a big textile blanket and hung it over the mirror. Maybe I'm paranoid now too, or maybe not. If he was a peeping Tom, he didn't get anything. Take a nap, and later, as we head out for some food and checking out town, night is drawing near. The motel parking lot is now 2/3 full. We were early. Good. Girlfriend says. I feel foolish and swear to myself to be less paranoid. She is usually the paranoid one for the two of us. That mirror though, never mind. So we spend the evening having dinner and driving around until we finally decide it's time to get back to the motel. It is dark and it's way before GPS day, so I consult the city map we have. I sit in the passenger seat, glad she is driving, while I try to read the map of San Diego in the light of a feeble tiny keychain light. We are driving roughly back in the right direction of the motel, somewhat parallel to the beach boulevard we need to be on, but I realize we might have gone too far. As I stare at the map in that dim light, she looks in the rearview mirror and suddenly says, That van there is following us. I look up. Surely now she is the one being paranoid. What? Behind us, one lane to the right, is an old silverly blue van. A bit run down with darkened windows. I swear, she says. He has been behind us for 3 blocks at least and took the same turns, and he is not passing us even when I drive slow. Look around, there is hardly any traffic in this direction as we roll on. I seriously doubted her, my rational mind telling me that victims rarely ever get picked randomly. Try to calm her down, look at the map again, and get an idea. Look, I said, we actually have to take a U-turn left to get down into the lane that takes us back towards the beach boulevard with the motel. So, I said, looking down the road at the next traffic light, a block away, there is no cop here. Take an illegal U-turn at that next light, then we'll see. She nods. I know she is a way better driver than me. She has 3 more years of driving experience with a stick shift in narrow European streets, while I just learned driving in California. As we approach the next traffic light crossing, clear no U-turn hanging next to the light, and the eerie silver blue van behind us to the right, the light turns red, and girlfriend gone race car driver puts the pedal all the way down, motor howling, and shoots over the red light in an illegal U-turn around to get in the opposite direction. And the van? I kid you not, it sped up, shot into our lane behind us and did the same exact thing, wheels screeching on the pavement. Then it accelerates full throttle to catch up, being merely an arm's length behind our bumper, its lights glaring into our rearview mirror, blinding like heck. Hit it, hit it, hit it, I mumbled, now panicking myself even, and my girlfriend accelerates, the van behind us staying on our tail. What now? We shoot down 3 blocks, the van right upon us. More cars join in our direction though. Behind us the traffic gets denser and the lanes merge into one. Now the van is still behind us, but close behind the creepy van are 3, 4 or more other cars, all speeding, all pretty close to each other. We can see their lights. We are back on the boulevard where our motel is, a 1-lane road with many fairly close parked cars to our right, with just the occasional gap or entries to other parking lots and a concrete barrier on the left. No room to go but forward. We are moving fairly fast, easily 60 miles per hour. For sure, way past the speed limit here. But so is everybody else. How do we shake this van? Surely we shouldn't lead them straight to the motel. Girlfriend's super driver suddenly hits the brakes and veers to the right. The van has no choice. It cannot brake or it will get hit by the cars behind it, and it passes by us on the left, immediately followed by 3, 4 or 5 more speeding cars tailing it, all fast in one lane, while my girlfriend swoops the car perfectly into what feels like a tiny pigeonhole of a parking spot. We can't stay here, I muttered, after we came to a stop and I caught my breath, totally stunned by her skills. I know, she said, and hit the pedal again, shooting out into the traffic. But now we were behind the van, safely at least 8 or 9 cars behind it. They can't possibly know. Just 200 yards further down came our motel. She took a swing into the parking lot. We parked and rushed up into our motel room, the one with the creepy mirror. I looked back the whole time to see whether anybody had seen us, but nothing. Just a pleasant summer evening wind, the sound of traffic going by and cicadas. I didn't sleep much that night, and neither did she. Just another tour summer night in San Diego. My dad always leaves the house around the same time. It's always before the sunrise. Not even 20 minutes, my dad is walking, and he sees a candle burning and goes on a walk in. And once he's gotten closer, he sees what he thinks is a fire hazard, and he's going to put out the candle. Then he realizes it's a crime scene. There are decapitated animals surrounding the candle. My dad suspects the animals are a dog, 2 chickens, and a pigeon. He doesn't blow out the candle because it's a crime scene, and he immediately calls the police. There's no one blood-soaked into the ground. No blood anywhere. The animals were decapitated somewhere else. My dad was very disturbed because who sacrifices animals and leaves a regular yoga candle? This is disturbing because months ago my dad was walking and taking pictures. He's a photographer. Then suddenly a girl in her late teens to 20 at the oldest tells him he must follow her to see these mushrooms in a tree. He'd seen her before and said she reminded him of Wednesday Addams. They were far from the path and started to act way too excited about the mushrooms. He realized the situation was weird and left. Not before she said she'd see him again. So the police didn't come right away, but they asked my dad and another walking friend to give them their numbers. Finally, my dad got a call from his walking friend who'd given his number to the cops. The cops were very lackadaisical. It seems like this isn't the first time they found animals sacrificed in the woods. However, it wasn't a dog, it was a goat. My dad took a different walk for 2 days and he was concerned. There was nothing he could do though. This just happened and I'm seriously scared. My husband and I live in a ranch house with a basement. My parents also live in the house. My point is I'm very scared about the animal sacrifice and also the stalker girl who seemed to want to hurt my dad. I think about this a lot and I truly think I might have stopped a kidnapping just by being in a parked car. My ex-boyfriend lived with me for over a year and there was a period of time where his truck was acting up, so I'd pick him up from work. He works just down the road from my place at a liquor store, so he'd get out around 10 p.m. on weeknights, so one night he asks me to pick him up and I agree. I get all swaddled in my pajamas and drive down to grumpily wait for him since my bedtime is 10 p.m. due to my job. Parked my car in the small parking lot out front. His liquor store is sandwiched between a sex shop and a head shop. Party central, I guess. By now the head shop and liquor store are closed, so the thirds of the lots are mostly empty. The sex shop only had one other car in front of it. Outside the liquor store is my car and one other, 3 total cars, with a woman standing outside of it, sitting on her hood. I don't think much of it. Maybe she is waiting for somebody in the sex shop, or one of my ex's co-workers and just relaxing in the summer night air. I sit hunched in my seat, car off, playing on my phone. I notice a white van. I know it's cliche, but that's why I noticed it. Pull into the lot, drive through slowly, and then back out onto the main road. Weird, but maybe they wanted alcohol and saw the store was closed. Whatever. I go back to my phone, but I glance at the woman. Still outside of her car, but moved between my car and hers. I had parked a couple of spots over, so close but not too close. I go back to my phone. The same white van pulls in again and stops in front of her. I sit up slightly to watch. I'm a true crime nut, what can I say? I'm easily alerted and watch some guy roll down the van window and lean out to talk to the woman. I pull out my phone to snap a photo of the license plate. Again, just in case, but I can't see it. So I turn on my car and go to open the door, but the guy in the van instantly pulls away and leaves. The woman moves closer to my car as I get out and approach her and ask her what that was, and she says she doesn't know. He was trying to ask her for directions, but stopped mid-sentence when I turned on my car. I ask her if she's waiting for anyone, and she says kinda. She's been sitting outside the liquor store for 3 hours, waiting on a tow truck because she locked her keys inside of it, and she couldn't leave the car because her puppy was in the back seat. Thankfully, not a hot night. A very nice night. So, she was waiting for a tow truck. As she and I are talking, my ex comes out and asks what's up. So, we decide to help her since there was no way I was leaving her alone now. I have some rope in my car for emergencies, and my ex uses it to basically jimmy her door open, make a lasso, and hook it around her door lock and pull it up to unlock it. It works and we open the door just as the tow truck pulls in. Her puppy is safe and we wish her well. and I get back in the car and just tell my ex. I think I almost watched her get kidnapped. I'm so lucky these encounters all occurred in public places. For reference, I'm female 24, have freckles and naturally red hair. I'm almost 5'7". The first time this man, who appeared to be about the same age and height as me, approached me while I was in a popular downtown bar with my best friend. I saw this man approach and I was not interested whatsoever, so as to not lead him on, I kept my responses short. The conversation went as follows. His intro line was, "You have so many freckles. They're in such random places." "That's how they work," I said. "That is how you know you're a real redhead," he said. I was creeped the heck out already at this point. "Yeah, I'm well aware," I said. He lingered to ask a couple more pointless questions until my friend and I managed to get away. My friend and I ended up going to a different bar across the street a little while later in the night. We had settled into the new bar, were a little bit more drunk, and my friend went to the bathroom, leaving me at a high top table up against the wall. The same man appeared out of nowhere to my left and put one arm against my table and the other against the wall, so I had nowhere to go, saying to me, "You're the redhead from before." Fellas, never physically tap a girl that you're trying to hit on, by the way. I was extremely uncomfortable, but I figured my friend would be back soon and would be able to help me out of the situation without causing a scene. He asked me several more awkward questions. Meanwhile, I had secretly texted my friend to hurry back to save me from a creepy guy. He then asks, "Take a picture with me." "Why?" I said. "For the memories." I was still trapped and I was hoping if I complied he would leave me alone, so I let him take a picture of us while I was smiling a fake hostage smile. My friend had reappeared but was standing by the bar not approaching the table. I pretended to be drunker than I was and rushed over to her, gushing, "Oh, you're back. Let's go dance." And I dragged her away to explain the situation. Fast forward a week, my next encounter with this man was at a completely different and very busy bar with different female friends of mine. I was having a good time and suddenly I looked to my left. And this man, I kidding you not, running in my direction, phone outstretched, with the picture he forced me to take with him on the screen. I had had enough, and I was done being polite to save his feelings as I sat there scared. I told him, "Leave me alone, you creep me out." He venomously replies, "Well, you're an ugly bitch anyways." My friends catch wind something is going on, and as he walks away, they offer to protect me if needed. For months, I thought it was my last interaction with the man. I was wrong. I had taken it as a warning, an example of how men's demeanor can change once they have been rejected, and it was chilling. 7 months later, I had forgotten about the prior encounters, and I was casually browsing a drugstore makeup display at night after the gym. I was looking down on a product when my spidey senses started going off. Somebody was standing on the other side of the display and staring at me in my periphery. I look up and a man is 2 feet in front of me. I didn't realize it yet, but it was the same man. He asked me if the drugstore were and sold chapstick. It's a drugstore. Everybody without fail sells chapstick, obviously. Taken aback, my initial thought was that he assumed I was an employee, and I replied, "I don't work here." He smiled with a slow smile, maintained eye contact, and said, "Okay." We both continued shopping until he returned to another makeup aisle I was at in the store. He said, "I think I've met you before." I told him I didn't believe we had, as I truly didn't remember him yet. He began to ask me questions that every girl my age in the city would answer yes to. "Have you been downtown before?" "Yeah, everyone has. But like every weekend." "Not every single weekend," I said. "No, but last summer with girls," he said. At this point, I was getting a very bad feeling in my stomach. Everything about his body language, demeanor, and the things he was saying felt off, and he was staring. He insisted 2 more times that we had met and would not let it go, so I suggested, "Lots of people confuse me with other redheads they've met before. I'm sorry, I don't remember meeting you." He stared at me after a moment and slowly said, "No, I know the one I spoke to." I began walking to the register as he followed, and as I walked, it finally clicked who it was, and I was getting afraid. His social unawareness and weird questions made me sure it was him. I played it cool until I had paid for my items and I was leaving the store. I didn't look back, but I knew he had items to pay for before he could follow, so as soon as I was out the door, I sprinted for my car, got in, locked it, and sat in for a moment stunned as I processed what had happened. I came to my senses quickly and I drove to the parking lot exit. I looked back and he was just outside of the doors of the pharmacy, his head looking back and forth across the dark parking lot for me. I know he saw my car leaving the parking lot, and since it was at night, few people were at the pharmacy, so it was clearly me leaving. I took note of the car he was walking to, and I decided to take an extra long route home to ensure I wasn't being followed. This route led through a wealthy neighborhood at the far east end of my city, so there was nothing that way aside from high-end homes. I looped through a roundabout in this neighborhood and I saw a car matching his drive straight through. There was no way to know if it was his, however it was chilling. There was no sign of his car after that. A couple of weekends later was my final encounter. It was St. Patrick's Day, and the bars downtown were as packed as I'd ever seen them. I was in the same bar he had first approached me in months before, alone as I was waiting for friends to get through security. He rushed up to me from the crowd and said, "Hey, I know you from," insert name of pharmacy here. I had to assertively tell him to leave me alone multiple times. He kept asking, "Why? Do you have a boyfriend or something?" I responded again saying, "That's none of your business, leave me alone." It's interesting how some men only seem to take another man's claim to a woman as a no, and not a woman's obvious and direct disinterest. To this day, another 7 months later, that was the last I saw of him. I am lucky these encounters were in public. They could have easily turned violent otherwise. I wrote this hoping to show other women that being assertive and at times rude is completely okay and necessary to protect yourself. Some men do not take no for an answer easily. To this day, it baffles me why he would try so hard to make me remember him after he called me an ugly bitch anyways. Anyways, stay vigilant, ladies. Sorry for any grammar mistakes because English isn't my first language. The night of the national day here in my country, after having a nice meal with some friends, my boyfriend asked me to go check on one of his friends. A father or a son kind of relationship, since he's not feeling well. He has some heart conditions. So on our way home, we stopped by his place. Around 10 at night, we got there, drank a beer and chatted with him, his wife, and his stepson for a moment. After about 45 minutes, we were about to leave when we heard a crazy howling come from outside in front of the house. In retrospect, it sounded so much like zombies growling. His stepson opened the door and asked what was going on, but he doesn't even have time to finish his sentence. That's when a man erupts at the door, covered in blood. I mean dark, black, dried blood, and so much of it. I thought he had a dark skin tone since he was covered in so much blood. It took me about 30 seconds. Seemed like 5 minutes, but surely took only 30 seconds to realize it was all dried up blood coming from those gigantic slashes that he had on his head. Definitely not his skin color. I must say, he looked and sounded like a mort vivant. It's the French word for zombies, and it literally translates as dead alive. That's exactly what he was, the walking dead. He had 3 deep gashes on his head. The biggest was in the middle, from his forehead to the back of his head, 2 inches wide at the largest. So the guy just screams and yells and falls to the ground, and everybody freezes like in the movies. I jumped on the guy. Instinct kicks in, and we bring him out, me and my boyfriend, without looking back. We were in the car in less than 1 minute for sure. I can't really explain what went through my mind, but I knew that if we were not on our way to the hospital right away, he wouldn't survive. I sat him in the front passenger seat so I could keep him awake while my boyfriend drove. I called the police the minute we got on the road, so they could send an ambulance to meet us on the way to the hospital. But the agent on the phone started asking me to pull the car on the side of the highway and wait for the ambulance to arrive, which we haven't done since the guy was freaking dying in my arms. We got to the hospital before the ambulance and the police, but as soon as we got there, some medics who were already outside came and helped him right away. The police then arrived at the hospital and took our deposition. But guess what happens next? The guy we brought to the hospital falls into a coma after 30 minutes being there, before the police could interrogate him. From that moment on, the police started the procedures for a homicide investigation, and we were then considered prime suspects or last witnesses of a possible murder. They finally let us go home at 4 a.m. and came back the next day for asking further questions and letting us know that they knew we were not related to the crime. They also informed us that the guy had escaped the hospital the next morning in a cab, that the attack was probably gang-related, and that those gashes were probably done by a machete, that he survived the attack because he was on heroin. I will never forget that night and those screams, holding on to the fact that I saved a life. About a month ago, I, 21 female, moved downtown in a new apartment with my boyfriend, 22 male. It's been going great and we loved having a smaller place together with our dog and cat, but recently we've been having weird stuff happen. For reference, we were on the bottom level. A few weeks ago, after work I was sitting on my couch waiting for my boyfriend to get home when I heard my front door slightly open. At the time I wasn't locking it, so my boyfriend could just walk in without having to dig out his keys, etc. Well, maybe it was just the wind since the door has trouble latching anyway. I walked up to it and opened the door, and a man was walking up my steps, but bolted away towards the opposite direction when he saw me. Weird. I didn't tell my boyfriend because honestly I thought nothing of it. Fast forward a few days later though, I was sitting on my couch playing my Switch and I heard a noise from our back door that I was sitting a few feet away from. All of a sudden, somebody ripped open our screen door and grabbed the glass sliding door handle to open it, but they ran away when I yelled. What the F? It happened so fast and I was so shocked that I didn't see what they looked like. I called for my boyfriend in the other room and told him what happened and he grabbed his skateboard. Yeah, I know, but it was our only defense at the moment, and we went to check the front door. As he opened it, I heard him say, "What's up, man?" And then he came back inside. He told me a man was walking up our steps and turned to walk the opposite direction when my boyfriend opened the door. The same thing that happened to me a few days prior. I told him my experience and he got freaked out. I messaged a few of my friends and they offered to give us their Ring camera and suggested that we get a better weapon than a skateboard. My theory is somebody is scoping out our apartment, knowing we're new. Definitely startled us and makes me on edge every time I'm home alone, constantly glancing out the back door, making sure it's still locked. Hey everyone, this is my first post on this subreddit, and it's not as terrifying as some of the stories I've seen here, but still it was chilling. It happened this morning and I want to write it all down before I forget the details. Let me preface this story with a little bit of background. I am a college student majoring in engineering. I'm currently away from school on a co-op rotation with a major company. My company is headquartered in a larger city and I'm working at a smaller site just north of the headquarters. I live in a small township in the suburbs, a gated apartment complex, and a very nice area with low crime rates. I regularly go on jogs with music on full blast and my dog at my side. We walk around at night. It's all by accounts a very safe place to live, and I feel very safe here. Well, until today that is. I woke up and got ready for work like normal. When I got in my car, not only was it basically frozen over, but I noticed I was low on gas. I decided to not risk it and fill up before work. Once my front and back windows defrosted just enough for me to see, I drove a block down the road to my usual fill-up spot. It has a lot of pumps and usually isn't packed, and it's super close to my apartment. They also usually have lower prices than other gas stations in the area. I pull into the parking lot and there isn't another car anywhere, save for a semi-truck parked by the doors and employee cars around the side. All the pumps are open. I pull up to the farthest right pump and hop out. As I'm swiping my card and doing all that fun stuff, another car pulls up. I didn't get a great look at it honestly, but it wasn't shiny or new. I barely paid any attention until the car stopped at the pump on the other side of my own. You know how pumps are double-sided, right? Of all the open ones, this driver chose the one connected to the one I was currently using. Not exactly perfect pandemic manners. Still, I didn't think that much of it, at least not initially. I could hear the other driver swiping their card and entering their PIN number. I was freezing cold and just trying to hurry. I turned around and put the nozzle in the car and I stood there for a minute. Foolishly, I decided to keep my back turned. I didn't want to have any contact with that person, so I tried to pretend nobody was there. Once I filled up, I removed the nozzle and turned around, still keeping to myself and not lifting my eyes. I finished the transaction and got my receipt. While it was printing, I looked up casually. I almost fell flat on the pavement when I saw a man peering around the corner of the pump staring at me. You know how people sometimes describe creepy people as having an inhuman quality? I never understood that until today. The way this man looked at me sent a shiver down my spine. His eyes were cold and unyielding. He was not blinking or moving, but his gaze was growing even more intense. There was something animalistic in the way he stared at me. I felt like a deer being watched by a mountain lion. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and my instinct screamed at me to run. This all took place in the span of just a couple of seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. I quickly opened my car door. When I did, he moved his head, tilting it to the side to peer into my car. I didn't consider it at the time, but he might have been looking to see if I was alone. I intentionally blocked the view of the inside of my car with my body and closed the door quickly. Locked it immediately. I mentioned earlier that my car was nearly frozen over. By now, the front and back windows were entirely clear. The side windows, however, were almost still all icy. There was a single strip of clarity in the driver's side window, a result of me rolling the window down a few moments prior in an attempt to clear it off. As I hastily buckled my seatbelt, I ventured a glance to my left. The man was still there staring, but he had inched closer. I could see more of his body than before. He was pretty tall with dark hair and a well-built frame. He was certainly much larger than me. He seemed a few years older than me as well. Had it not been for those eyes, I might have said he was attractive, but those eyes, they were just haunting. I decided to do the logical thing and get myself out of there as fast as possible. I didn't want to chance him being able to follow me. Though my work has great security, I didn't want him knowing where I worked. I don't know if this man was just a creep or something much darker, but I don't really want to find out ever. When I was in my 20s, I was unmedicated bipolar and I was dealing with an immense amount of unprocessed trauma. Being bipolar, I was also being super promiscuous and just not making good choices. I was using OkCupid and matched with a guy. Seems pretty normal. Worked at a smoke shop, had a dog with no kids, and was married. Come to find out, they were looking for somebody who would be down for a threesome. Talked for a few weeks and then he invited me over. I was manic and said yes. I walked to the street corner of my apartment and told him where I was. He picked me up in a newer BMW and we drove across town to his place. When I got there, the vibe was awkward, if that makes sense. I met his wife and we all chatted. She told me she was an RN at the local hospital and was showing me her tattoos. After a while, he offered to make us drinks. My mom always told me to be careful about taking drinks from strangers at bars and such, but my dumbass assumed it was fine since I was already at the house. Still, I watched him. He had several mini vodka bottles and was pouring them into glasses. He added juice of some kind and then served them. It tasted like an ordinary cheap shitty drink. Way too much booze and it was dry. After a while, I felt super anxious. His wife had gone into the bedroom and I was alone with her husband. Something was off. Felt nauseous and just overall sick. I worked at the hospital and assumed I just picked up a bug. I stood up and it felt like the entire world had shifted. I damn near fell over the couch. I didn't think I had drunk that much, but I thought I must have. I grabbed my bag and told him I'm going to call a cab and go home. Immediately, he stood up and loudly said, "No, you can't." He said it almost too fast and frantically. It scared the heck out of me and I knew immediately I needed to leave. I told him I wasn't staying and I was leaving. He tried to block the door, but being shorter than him, I ducked under his arm and he tried to grab my shoulder, but I shook him off and swung at him. My blow landed on his throat and knocked the wind out of him. I took the opportunity and ran as fast as I could out the door and onto the street. I had a cab number saved on my phone from a really nice cabbie. It was his personal cell phone number, and he was a close friend of somebody I knew well. I don't know why, but I called him. He answered groggily and was clearly just woken out of a slumber. I'm crying as I told him what happened. He perked up right away and told me to walk to the gas station across the way and wait for him there. Less than 5 minutes later, it felt like he was pulling into the parking lot. He jumped out and ran over to me. He had remembered taking me home, so he knew the address already. He told me to have a friend meet me at my house and stay with me. My friend met us there and brought me inside. I don't remember the rest at all. Apparently, I was acting erratic and making no sense. She called 911 and an ambulance came. I woke up in the hospital with the doctors telling me I had such a high amount of benzos in my system that it was a miracle I made it home alive. I filed a police report and the nurse was arrested. I'm not sure what happened from there, but I'm so grateful for the cabbie that came to my rescue. This just happened about 15 minutes ago and was one of the weirdest encounters I've ever had. My family and I, 22 female, were sitting in our living room watching TV after dinner. All of a sudden, there's an unexpected knock at the front door. I go to open it and there are 3 young teens, probably about sophomores in high school, that I don't know. They tell me that a few guys were following them and they needed to look like they knew somebody. I told them immediately to come inside to evade the people following them. The teens told me it was 3 younger boys, probably about 8th grade, that had been following them as they walked a mile from a gas station nearby to my neighborhood. I went outside to see if I saw the boys, and sure enough, they were just down the street. When I stepped outside, they yelled, "Lacey, is that you?" I didn't answer, but went inside and asked if any of the girls seeking refuge were named Lacey. None were. My dad then went outside to tell the boys to move along, and they got super mouthy and rude. Eventually, they went up the street and out of sight. However, they came back down a few minutes later, so I opened the door and yelled for them to leave, but they argued with me and wouldn't go anywhere. My dad went back outside, and a neighbor heard the yelling and came to see what was happening. With the threat of 2 grown men, the boys finally left. Not without some lip, though. I then drove the 3 teens back to one of their houses so they could evade the boys and get back home safely. Something was really weird about the interactions with the young boys. I don't know what they were looking to do or if they were just looking for trouble, but something did not sit right with me. Just glad the 3 teens felt my house was a safe place to go. So when I, 24 female, was around 8 years old, I had a best friend that lived right around the block from me. We grew up in a quiet suburban town where you didn't really hear about crime all that much. My friend B lived in a house on a corner with a pretty large garden front yard and a little garden area with rocks closer to the sidewalk / end of her yard. We often liked to sit on the rocks and talk about whatever kids that age talk about. I remember it being dusk on a warm summer night. We were so distracted by our conversation, neither of us initially noticed that the same car drove by multiple times. Mind you, her road was a quiet side street, so it would be a bit odd for a car to be driving around in circles. The only reason we noticed this final time was because they actually pulled over in the street right in front of us. Initially, I remember thinking they needed directions. Dumb in hindsight, because who would ask kids for directions? It wasn't until we both saw their car door swing open that the gravity of the situation began to sink in. Keep in mind, the street was only about 10 feet from where we were sitting in a yard. Both individuals seemed to be men with their hoods up, and the passenger immediately lunged at us, saying nothing. My friend screamed and ran towards her front door. I, being in total shock, was a bit slower to react. I noticed he also held something reflective in his hand, most likely a knife. He actually almost grabbed me, but I made a run for it in time and caught up to my friend to the front door. Now here's the creepiest part. For whatever reason, B's family locked the door. She had an older sister that accidentally locked it without realizing we were playing outside. I vividly remember banging on the door and screaming, with tears streaming down my face, for them to please open up. The men did not chase us to the door, but they didn't leave yet either. I remember looking over my shoulder and seeing them smirking and standing near their car. It felt like they were waiting to see if we were home alone. A moment later, but it felt like an eternity, my friend's mom swung open the door and both men jumped into their car and peeled out. There were actually tire marks on the road from how ferociously they whipped around and sped off. B's mom, who also saw the car peel out, was extremely upset and immediately called the police. I remember my mom also being called, and B and I were both questioned at her house by the officers that arrived soon after. B and I mentioned that we had briefly noticed a car drive by a couple of times, but we didn't put two and two together until after things took a turn for the worst. I never heard anything else about this after that day, but this experience remains burned into my memory. I still get anxious thinking about what would have happened if that front door didn't open when it did. I was sitting in a chain restaurant, fairly busy with my mom in the late morning. In this restaurant, we were sitting on the opposite ends of a small table with my back facing a wall while she faced me, thus allowing me to see everybody entering, exiting, and so on and so forth. For context, I'm not a public figure whatsoever. And yes, being a 16-year-old girl at the time, I did have social media accounts, but on the very few that I did post, the accounts were set on private, only allowing friends and family to view my content. As somebody who indulges in true crime, I like to observe my surroundings. A guy walks into the restaurant. Now, my mom and I are fairly far from our hometown since we had only stopped for a bite on the way to the airport, so the likelihood of me ever having come in contact with this person in the past was practically impossible, nor did I recognize him at all. He seemed to wander around for what seemed like forever until he finally stood in the line to collect his order while persistently glancing over at me. Standing in close proximity to my table, he drew out his phone, camera pointing directly at me. I have always had a habit of blankly staring back at people whenever they were being creepy, as I'd like to call it, so the amount of times we made eye contact bewilders me, as he just didn't acknowledge the fact that I knew he was doing. I have always been a very shy and conservative girl, so before anyone makes any assumptions, there were no breasts or shoulders on show, so it's not as if there were any good future jerking material or whatever. He took the photo, picked up his drink, wandered around a little bit longer, still peering over at me, and left. My mother had no idea that this had occurred since her back was turned, and I felt too embarrassed to inform her. All I can say is, where is that photo now? This was over 2 years ago, and this question still haunts me. Is it lingering in his camera roll or chilling in the deep web? Never mind that. Why did he take the photograph in the first place? In the summer of 2019, my dad and I bought a fixer-upper. I'm a single mom with 3 kids, and we bought it to work on it together, give the kids and me a place to live, etc. I never met my neighbor that lived behind me until recently. I'd see him sometimes, never with a shirt on, doing stuff in the backyard and whatnot. He's probably in his mid-60s. We had a pretty big storm about 2 months ago, and the fence between our properties partially collapsed. I have a husky and he loves to run away, so a fully fenced-in yard is a must. I called my dad to let him know, and the next time I went outside, I saw the fence was back up. I saw my neighbor in the backyard and I hollered to him. asking if that was his doing. I then realized he was only in his underwear. Awkward. He said, "I usually have on more clothes than this." And I thought to myself, BS, I've never seen you with a shirt on. We introduced ourselves. He met my dog and my youngest son, age 12. He made some uncomfortable comments about how, had he known his neighbor was such a pretty young lady, he would have blah 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 blah. You. I'm 38. Within a week, we had another storm and a tree fell from my yard, pulverizing part of the fence and his garage. We chatted again and he said he was so grateful that nobody was hurt. My parents came over and some church friends and we cleaned up the mess from the tree. I called insurance about the fence since there was now a 3-foot gap in it. My dad and I temporarily laid some loose boards in the front of the gap to deter the dog from trying to run. Maybe a week later, I was playing tag with my dog in the yard. Huskies, am I right? And I noticed my neighbor sunbathing, completely naked, starfished on the lawn, balls out and everything. Then I noticed a week or so after that the boards I was propping up to cover the gap were disappearing. Then I noticed my dog paying a ton of attention to that part of the fence, sniffing and whining. I peeked over and there was a dead rabbit right up against the fence. I think he's trying to lure the dog into his yard to get me over there. I slept with the window open the other night. Probably a mistake, but my room faces the street and not his property. In the middle of the night, the dog started barking at something outside the window. It was so weird because he never barks at people except for attention. Is this all in my head or is my neighbor creepy AF? By the way, thank you for all validating my concerns. I'm working on getting cameras installed. Also working on getting new fencing installed, but this is unfortunately a slow process with material shortages everywhere. I also want to point out that this man rents his own house and his landlady lives next door, and she and my dad have been in contact regarding the storm damage and such. They are both aware that he's creeping me out. I have a 15-year-old daughter and she's basically not allowed to go in the yard alone as long as this guy lives here. Another update. My dad and I patched the gaps in the fence temporarily with plywood until the entire fence can be rebuilt. I checked the sex offender registry and I didn't see him, but I do not know his last name. He rents privately from a landlady, so it's possible that he has a criminal history, as that makes it difficult to rent through a company or purchase a home. My dad talked to both the neighbor and the landlady and has told me that they had some sort of falling out and the landlady and my neighbor are no longer on speaking terms. This might work to my benefit because she might make him go somewhere else. Turns out he's been renting the house for 6 or 7 years. It is 425 square feet, and the bathroom has no door on it. My dad went inside to use the restroom and was shocked. I also feel like my dad was checking him out. And for those of you concerned about my 80-year-old dad, he's one of those people that just don't age. He still rides a motorcycle, volunteers every weekend, founded a nonprofit organization in his retirement, and won a regional environmental achievement award for his work to save a local lake. So long story short, my dad is a badass, yes. So this literally just happened this week. I'm a 25 female and single mom. We had a guy quit earlier this week and we thought he skipped town. This guy always gave me the creeps. He was at least 59 to maybe 63 and never took the time. For a bit more of backstory, I am open about being a true crime fan. I listen to true crime podcasts regularly at work. Well, one day he told me to look up a more current missing woman's case. She was a mom with brown hair and brown eyes like me. She went missing right before we moved to my town. I hope I'm overthinking this, but last night my mom took my son for the night and this guy knew I was alone on Thursday night due to small talk in the office. As I was closing my curtains due to it getting dark and you could see clearly into my house, I saw his van down the street. I locked the doors and had my gun with me in my chair watching TV. Now, this is a small town that I live in, so my friends and family will stop over randomly, but they will never knock. So when I heard a knock on the door, I loaded my gun and looked out the window for a vehicle. Nothing. Whiskey. My Yorkie started growling, which he never does. He barks like a little dog, but I've never heard him growl. Something wasn't right. Even though my ex-husband taught me all sorts of self-defense. I called the police and, with snow on the ground, there were footprints going all around my house. He left the gate open. I haven't heard from the police if they found him yet. I lock my doors more often now, and I have friends and family call before they come over. Update. A lot of people have been asking about who he is. I didn't put it in there for fear of him seeing this, especially now knowing he has fake accounts, such as one called Sarah Baker. His initials are JW. Some people were asking about the comments he made towards me. This includes things like, "You're very pretty and seem to know a lot about the Delphi case," or, "You have pretty brown hair and eyes." Also brown. "I bet the boys chase after you." I really mean it. You're very pretty and could help me get a lot of views. And I know no one really asked for this, but this is the case he wanted me to look up. I feel freaked out because of how she looks. Brown hair, brown eyes. I know he lived in that area, and I know he liked going to parks. I just have a weird feeling about him and this woman. I'm an immigration inspector in an Asian country. Not a cop, but we do a lot of similar work. I work at one of the biggest airports in the country. I was working in line for residents of my country, like citizens, foreign citizens with legal resident status, etc. This incredibly thin man in his 30s comes through. My first impression is he's super unkempt, dressed in tattered clothes, seemingly hyperactive, moving around a lot, maybe a bit paranoid, talking a million kilometers a minute, giggling at himself, and super in-your-face friendly. This by itself is not only creepy but suspicious. To add to it, his travel companion is a non-native 14-year-old female who's the apparent opposite of him in every way. Well-dressed, silent, stiff and still, extremely tense and with no emotion. That's already sketchy enough, so in accordance with our human trafficking recognition and reaction guidelines, we separate them. Since I was the primary inspector, that was my job. I determined the best course of action is sending them to our investigatory area's waiting room, getting police present to help separate the girl to bring her to our safety room, and getting him into an interview. The first part of the plan went perfectly, but I went to get him to lead him to our interview area and his demeanor completely changed. He went from excited, hyperactive anxiety to a much more calm but angry state. Originally, he was making large dramatic hand movements, talking loudly, but now he was just quickly glaring at me and muttering to himself. We get him seated and situated. I describe the situation to my supervisor and I come back with a partner to start my interview with him. I introduce myself and my partner and we start asking the typical immigration questions. Why are you here? Where are you going? What do you plan to do? How long will you be here, etc. He had very vague answers that didn't make a lot of sense. He was here for business. He was going to a nearby city but couldn't name where. He had a business conference but couldn't explain his profession and he had an open ticket. He also stated unpromptedly that the girl was his daughter. We went over to the safety room the girl was interviewed in and she stated to the interviewer through a translator that the guy was her boyfriend. She also stated he promised her money, travels, gifts, etc. for sex. He was detained by our on-site police and placed in our holding cells pending an investigation. We were searching his possessions and we were notified that he offered the equivalent of $500,000 in a cash bribe to an officer to release him. In our investigation, we found $850,000 exactly undeclared in his secret compartment in his luggage. Let's just say he's going to be locked up for a long time. I was maybe 16 years old and I was kind of a rebellious kid. I joined Tinder to meet some older guys and I matched with this really attractive 20-year-old that seemed really into me. Anyways, he asked to pick me up from school the following day to get ice cream and walk around to the nearby lake, and I said yes. He picked me up and we had a great conversation. Nothing weird, and it seemed like we really enjoyed each other's company. When we got to the lake, nobody was there because it was the middle of October and cold on the water. We walked about halfway around the lake and that's when it got weird. He started talking to me about crime documentaries and how he studied them and knew how to kill somebody without getting caught. He started making tracks in the mud and said that he would want to wear 2 big shoes so the police couldn't match him on shoe size. He picked up his shoe to show me a size 10.5 and informed me that he wore an 8. It got easy. He was strolling around me while I was sitting on the bench like I was prey. He went to one of those dog baggy dispensers and pulled one off. He sheathed it up to his elbow and started swatting it in my face. I thought he might be trying to gross me out, so I was half giggling and swatting it away. On one of my swats, he grabbed my forearm and pulled me in the bag over my head. Still, I thought he might be kidding, but as I tried to get away, I noticed that he wasn't letting up. I was starting to panic now, realizing I wasn't getting any air, and he picked me up in a sort of headlock position. I was kicking and trying to elbow, and I guess one of those elbows connected to his groin, and we both fell to the ground. He laughed and said, "You've got more fight in you than I thought you did. I was just going to make you pass out, but I didn't even get that far. I'm proud of you." All of my stuff, like my phone and taser, etc., was in his car on the other side of the lake, so I decided to play along and pretend that it was funny. I told him I needed my inhaler now and to walk me back. He did, surprisingly. I got in his car and he grabbed my taser and my phone. While he walked around the back of the car to his driver's side, I texted my mom SOS and to track my location. When I looked up from my phone, I noticed the guy had pulled out a pocket knife. He slowly laid the tip into my chest, just enough for it to almost pierce skin, staring blankly at me, and this went on for about 30 seconds. I don't know why, but I said, "You're not going to do it." This seemed to snap him out of it, and he paused and then hysterically laughed, between laughs. He got out. "That's the second time I could have killed you today." The whole drive home, he proceeded to tell me about how he would have mutilated my body if I had accidentally died that day. I got home and bolted out of his car. As soon as I did, he sped off. I got a dick pic later that night, and then he blocked me. I looked him up, and it turns out he was actually 27 years old and had a criminal record for domestic violence. That's all I could get from him, though. I reported it to the police, but nothing came of it, probably because I wasn't willing to tell my parents what happened. Either way, it was the worst encounter of my life. After realizing I don't need a petty mentally ill doctor somehow finding my location on my regular account and pissing on my door and vowing vengeance, this is a throwaway. I was given a psychiatrist to prescribe my antidepressant medications in 1993 and 1994. This was 2 years before HIPAA, and expectations of what a psychiatrist did were not standardized or accurately portrayed in the media. Dr. X was a good-looking young professional. He always was, for a lack of a better word, manic. He would keep me for over an hour and a half. My appointment was supposed to be a 20-minute check-in once a month. Talking about life and the X-Files, we were both huge fans. It was the 90s, and eventually what a jerk his wife was for taping Melrose Place instead of his TV shows. Being a 16-year-old, I thought it was hilarious, and it was only once a month, so I shrugged it off. It was hard to find an agreeable doctor, so I stayed. Then the call started. My personal landline would ring, and it was Dr. X. I don't think I fully comprehended just how unprofessional that was back then, because X made it seem like he was checking up on my mood. On what was then a Friday night. He called a lot, and I tuned out his rambles as I watched TV or cooked dinner. Suddenly, he needed to see me twice a week, not once a month. I tried it for a month, but not only did that make me uncomfortable, but I also could not afford the commute. Hour each direction twice a week, so I contacted my insurance company to find someone closer. I felt he was escalating, so I ghosted the doctor and refused to pick up when the caller ID showed it was him calling. Upon meeting my new doctor, he asked me casually who my previous provider was. When I told him, his eyebrows raised. The new doctor also informed me I was on several redundant medications, the wrong strength, and many were unneeded, giving me severe side effects with little benefit. I could only wonder what the Dr. X was thinking, prescribing things so badly on purpose. So, the internet took off years later, and out of curiosity, in 2005, I looked him up. And wow, that man killed somebody with meds in the 90s. Not intentionally, it was a much older man with a health condition conflicted with meds Dr. X prescribed. I believe he was sued but don't remember the details. I learned through transcripts that Dr. X was also on a cocktail of drugs prescribed by himself. He had never been married and lived alone when the police served a search warrant. He was armed to the teeth, amassing an arsenal of illegal firearms, and peed on a fellow doctor's door while making faces at him through the glass because that doctor found out and turned him in for prescribing himself. His license was yanked, and I read the whole complaint bit by bit online. He had an automatic weapon he kept loaded in his briefcase. Never saw him without it, which was terrifying because I had no idea what he was carrying. The authorities realized I was now an ex-patient, so they never told me a damn thing. Pretty sure my parents would have sued his ass off for the medication debacle. He went on a rampage after I ghosted him. He was seen brandishing weapons, an AK-47, and committing petty vandalism against neighbors. Why was he not locked up right away? My theory was, since before true crime things were a thing, was that he was a fair, attractive white male who had a doctorate, was wealthy in a conservative town, and was charming. Not a stereotypical raving madman. It was his word against the average Joe. In a residential neighborhood, discharging his weapons led to police involvement, failing a mental health evaluation and a state board hearing. They freaked out in hindsight when I showed my parents and wondered how officials never contacted us. According to Yelp, he is now practicing and has a 1 to 2 star rating with several comments stating unprofessionalism. How does one have that kind of past and still practice? Think of all the certifications needed and insurance to practice after he was already sued 30 years ago. Be informed to check into your providers. It is never clear what caused his erratic behavior, but he was a very paranoid manic and losing touch with reality man. The drugs he had abused only seemed to augment that. Still, I swear he had a mental illness. Having been a psychology student, I have my hunches, but it is all speculation.